This brief video presentation is a summary of the country profile for Germany, as prepared by the German partner for Regional, a comparative analysis of regional policies for adult learning. This lifelong learning project was completed over the periods 2014-2015 across 16 regions in 6 European countries.
Okay, good morning. My name is Henning Marquardt. I'm representing the Agency for Adult and Further Education in Hanover, Lower Saxony, which is part of the Lower Saxony League for Liberal Adult Education, which is a partner in the regional project. And I'm going to present the research results from Germany. That is the results from the federal states of Baden-Württemberg, Lower Saxony, and Saxony-Anhalt. These 3 regions represent the whole German spectrum in terms of population, area, GDP, unemployment, and so on. We have conducted 9 interviews in these 3 regions. In Baden-Württemberg, we have conducted 2 and interviewed an elected and a non-elected policymaker. We had 4 interviews in Lower Saxony with an elected and a non-elected policymaker and 2 representatives of public agencies. We have had 3 interviews in Saxony-Anhalt with an elected and a non-elected policymaker and a member of a regional advisory board. In terms of secondary research, we have analyzed policy documents, of which few were directly relevant and a lot were indirectly relevant. Most directly relevant documents have been released before 2011, so before our actual research time span of 2011 and 2014, but because they were so important for what is going on in adult education in those areas, we have included them. And the difference in quantity that you see is also due to that short period of research, because many of those policies are long-term policies, so it's more or less random if policies have been released in those 3 years or beforehand. Concerning the formulation of adult learning policies, this is clearly a task of regional policymakers in the German regions. So it's not on national level, but clearly on regional level. The processes are very similar in the researched regions, which is due to the very similar legal basis in all 3 regions. So they have adult education acts in all 3 regions, which are very similar. Most important in policy formulation are formalized networks, regional umbrella organization, and personal contacts. That's what the interviewee stated. And formalized networks do exist in all 3 regions, but in different forms. Further relevant insight was that the non-elected policy makers seem more important than elected policy makers in the process of policy formulation. Because the non-elected policymakers are responsible for drafting bylaws, which do not have to be passed in the parliament, so they're very free on doing that on their own. And furthermore, they often prepare laws proper, which have to be passed in the parliament. They are prepared by non-elected policymakers, and usually the government ministry has a majority in the parliament, so there's not much change going on, not much contribution of the elected policymakers in parliament. They approve what the non-elected policymakers formulate, but they don't formulate themselves. Concerning the implementation, various actions arise from policies. Most importantly is the basic funding of AL providers. So the providers are funded with regional funds which is the majority of the funding that is going on, and this is the main way of implementing adult learning policies. This is regulated in the AAL Act, in the Adult Learning Acts, and the bylaws that come with it. Furthermore, the interviews state that campaigns to promote adult learning is an important action arising from the policies. However, the policy documents don't confirm this. So it seems overemphasized to me by the interviews. The main problems the interviews perceive in implementing AAL actions is limited funds. However, limited funds are not mentioned by the interviews from Baden-Württemberg, which is the economically most prosperous region we researched. Furthermore, political marginalization and the negative image of adult learning is mentioned as problems. Concerning the funding, the adult learning providers are regionally funded according to the Adult Learning Acts in all three regions, as I've said. But the regional funding, even though it predominates, it differs considerably in the regions, where you have around €2.50 per adult in Baden-Württemberg and €2.38 per adult in Saxony-Anhalt. You have almost €8 per adult in Lower Saxony. So there's really considerable difference in funding. On the other hand, in Baden-Württemberg, for example, the private funds that go into adult learning in the form of participation fees are much higher than in the other areas. Again, Baden-Württemberg is the most prosperous of the regions economically. National and EU funds are used for projects, and private funding plays a role, as I said, mainly as participation fees. Private-public partnerships play a small role in the funding of AL in the three regions, and the attitudes are very mixed. Some people say, well, it is very beneficial that we do it, and some people say it's a big problem to have public-private partnerships because of the lacking influence that policy and policymakers have, the influence they give away to private institutions. Which leads me to the key findings. The regions are rather similar concerning directly relevant policies, with noticeable exceptions, which is the regulation on educational leave, where in Lower Saxony and Saxony-Anhalt there's a law granting 5 days of paid educational leave for employees. There's none such law in Baden-Württemberg. They're working on one, but there isn't one yet. And the regional funding, as I said, is very different. There are many long-term policies, and the AAL policies are well integrated into other policies, which you saw by the large numbers of indirectly relevant policies. Those are regulations of professional fields mainly, stating who's responsible for training, which qualification is needed for certain posts and things like that. So it's well integrated. There's really a large and solid body of laws and regulations directly relevant to adult learning, but there's also many regulations that are indirectly relevant, which leads us to the conclusion that it's well integrated in other policies as well. The main drivers for adult learning are the needs, the demographic change, shortage of skilled labor, and current research, where we have to keep in mind that demographic change and shortage of skilled labor are buzzwords at the moment in Germany. Everyone is talking about them, and I'm sure that's why they found their ways into the interviews. The inhibitors or problems are reaching participants, they have difficulties in that to reach their target group. The unclear relevance of adult learning for the participants, for the potential participants, and on the political level. The demographic change again, and the lack of funds, of course, it's always in there. And there has been a variety of tools suggested that that policymakers use, or that policymakers could use. What repeatedly came up in the tools they use and in the tools they would need to develop further was networks and exchange. That seems to be very important, and to have reliable information and data on adult learning. Those are the two main features, two main tools that are used and that are needed, and where improvement is needed. Thank you.
Regional, a comparative analysis of regional policies for adult learning, supported by the European Lifelong Learning Programme.